I think our readings today point out to us the need to kind of get that big picture. In our gospel passage, we have the Sadducees, who are men of faith, but they're men of faith who really focus on the here and now. They're not thinking about heaven. They don't believe in a resurrection. They don't believe in that. They're very much focused on here and now issues, and they think it's also silly to be looking beyond. I would say that's pretty common for a lot of people. We all get pretty busy in life, and we keep our nose down to the grindstone, as we say, and we don't often elevate ourselves or allow ourselves to be elevated. You know, we read this beginning of the letter of Paul to Timothy. So here he is writing to his good friend whom he baptized, had a good relationship with, and he's left him in trust in him to be in charge of a church after he leaves. So you know that Timothy's important to Paul. And here's the beginning of the letter, and it's so beautiful. He has these wonderful images that, just the sense of Paul and to Timothy, my dear child, grace, mercy, peace from God. I'm grateful to God, whom I worship with a clear. He goes on and on. This letter is not how we write a letter today. Our letters are usually, dear so-and-so, and we kind of get right to the point. We don't have these long introductions and praising God or what have you. It's a thing of the past, particularly 2,000 years ago, but also more recent. And I share with you now that I have a letter in my office that I have had framed because it's very dear to me. It is a letter written by the PP, and that in Irish is the parish priest or the pastor, to my grandfather when he came over to America in 1922. I take it back, 1927. And he wrote him a letter after my grandfather gave him some money to help the church back home in County Galway. And the letter was this beautiful use of the English language, and it goes on to describe my grandfather and what he means to this priest. And then he goes on to describe how he knew very well and worked with my great-grandfather, my grandfather's father, and all the things he did in County Galway at the time of the land reform that was needed by the injustices of the British government over the Irish. And very beautiful. It's a testimony. He even says it at some point. This is a testimony that I give to you for you to hand on to your sons. And he goes on to name my uncles. So this pastor really knew my family. But I just thought it was so lovely that he took the time, and he writes in a beautiful way, take the time to write the letter by hand in a way that everybody used to. We've lost that, haven't we? Lost a lot of that. We're very quick. Today, a lot of our folks, including myself, are texting. It's very quick. And I find oftentimes emails and texts are a very poor way to communicate. They're very good for sharing information, but they're not good for communicating, for helping us to be one with one another, which is what communicating means. And that's what the letters have done. These letters from Paul and letters in the past, a way to celebrate. And they lift up our eyes. They give us that big picture of why we're here and what a person means to us. That's an art that I feel sorry about that we've lost. In this day and age, we constantly need to lift up our eyes so that we can keep focused on things down below. But Charles Lwanga today that we honor is such a character from the 1800s in Africa who was being asked to perform sexual things and such that he was against his faith, of course, his morality, and others were being forced into it. And these were not all Catholic, by the way. A lot of these folks were Anglican. And so we took them along as well, calling them saints, even though they're from another communion. It's a celebration of that sense of his lifting up his eyes and knowing there's something bigger. There's something greater here. In our world today, we need that, because we can get bogged down in the minutiae and get bogged down in other things. Lately, our own country, with our struggles of race relations and struggles with how government looks at that and certain persons are responding or not responding but reacting. We have examples in our own faith. In the Anglican faith, we have the example of Bishop Buddy the other day writing very articulately, very beautifully, her protest of what the president did in her church, as well as our own Bishop Gregory of Washington, D.C. yesterday wrote a fine little note, again, not a grand, long thing, but to the point as the bishop of the church of admonishing those who do things in a way that are not more politically motivated, not far-sighted, not looking at the big picture, and not remembering God. So let's pray for that grace today in our world, in our own life, that maybe we can honor this by writing a letter by hand to someone you love, and to take the time to actually write it out, ponder it, sit with it, maybe take a couple of days. I'm sure Paul didn't compose this overnight. It was probably well thought out and took him several days. Pray about that and pray for the grace of God to communicate in Holy Communion that we celebrate, that sense of being one with each other and with God.